In this video, we're going to combine match and index together to do the index match function, which is really just a combination of the two. So we're going to start out here with borrower 76598, and let's just start with our match function. Again, our match function, the first thing we ask for is the lookup value. That's going to be the borrower ID we're looking for in this case. And then the lookup array. In this case, the borrower ID is in column B. So I'm selecting all of that column, again, locking the cell references. And as before, we're using 0 for an exact match. Here we see the answer is 4, which indicates it's in the 1, 2, 3, the fourth element of the array, of the entire array, starting with the first row. It is in the fourth row. So that's what we want. 76598 is in the fourth row, which is what the match result gives us. The second piece, the index now, is going to be what do we want to get back? Right, so our array that we're going to look up, let's go ahead and do loan amount. We're going to select E6 to E11. And then for which row number do we want? Well, we want the row number that corresponds to that borrower ID. So the match gives us the row number of 4, so that's exactly what we can reference here. So in this case, we see 13876. Let's make that currency. And so we match our 76598 right here in the same row over to the 13,876. And so Sam's loan amount is tied to his borrower ID there. And that's the basic idea of index and match together, is that we first match on the borrower ID to figure out what row we need to be in. And then we get that same corresponding row from the index from whatever data we want to get back out. So in this case, I showed you getting the dollar amount back. But we can easily change our index function. Right? Let's move that instead of E, let's go to F. If we go to F, we now get the loan status. So we see that Sam's loan is on time. We can also see that it belongs to Sam by changing the F's to C's. So now we're pulling back the name rather than the loan amount or the loan status, and we get Sam. So index match is basically our ability to combine these two functions together. And so the way we traditionally want to do this, though, is together. So we're going to do index match, and we're going to wrap them together with one another. And so the way to see this kind of conceptually is let's start out by copying that function. We'll put our index function in here. And what we're going to also copy then is our match function. And what we're going to do is instead of referencing the match function as an external cell, what we're going to do is embed the match function instead of the cell reference. So right now you can see that C2 is referencing our match function. I'm going to replace C2 with the actual function that was inside the cell C2. So now we have index and then a match inside. So that's where we have index match, is that match is nested inside the index statement. And now we have all one formula that's able to relate the borrower ID to, in this case, the name of that borrower. And now whenever we come up here and change the borrower ID, say to 43237, we see the match updated, the index also updated off the match, but the index match updated simultaneously at the same time to give us all that same answer. So that's really the power of index match, is now we're able to get relative data for a particular borrower in this case, but in any data set where you have data organized either by rows or columns, you can use this same technique to pull back data about a certain borrower or a set of borrowers for that matter. One warning is really important with index match, and this is going to be true with most of these lookup functions that we're talking about, is that we have to make sure our arrays line up. So where we can get into trouble, for example, is if our arrays are no longer lined up. And what I mean by that is, here we have borrower ID and loan amount, and they both go from row 7 to row 12, row 7 to row 12. So those two arrays line up with one another. Say, however, that you come over here and change the index array, so what the data we want back, to include the header. So now you have one array here and the other one's bigger and not lined up. So let's see what happens. Well, now we have a different answer. Right? Now it's giving us 54,398. So let's talk about how we get that. The first thing that happens in this formula is that match gets evaluated. So we look for our borrower ID, 43237, in our match array over here, and we see that, well, 43237 is the third entry for Bill. All So the match gives us the number 3. Then we go to our index function. And our index function says, well, let's look from E6 down to E12. So we start here and we go 1, 2, 3. And that's why we get 54,398, is we're getting the third element of that array. So the function's working fine, we just haven't used it properly. We have to make sure that the two arrays line up. So how do we fix that? Well, we could fix the borrower ID array to include the header. That'll make it work. Or we can make sure that they both start in row 7. It doesn't matter where they start, just that they are lined up together and not staggered across the two columns or two data sets. So that's one warning that we have to watch out for with index and match. We'll see the same thing with other lookup functions like XLOOKUP in our next video.